In the previous video, we looked into PyQt5's slot and signal mechanism, and in this video we will be overloading widgets using disconnect. We will be updating the UI with several new widgets, and then we'll be importing the UI design and add functionality to it. We'll be using exception handling, and we'll also find a workaround when we are first calling disconnect. We will start with the UI we have designed in the previous video, but I have removed the signals and I placed the button click event together. So this one was the slot handling before, so I just put that in here so both buttons are next to each other and it's clear what does what. And as we said before, this is a best practice and it's also called loose coupling. And so what we want to do next is we want to add some functionality to convert our UI to Python files. And later we will use the PyInstaller, and so we want to prepare our GUI already for that by later being able to convert our Py files to executables. And we'll change our current design to do so. So on the previous design, the first thing I've done is I moved the button to the bottom here, to the right bottom, and I give it a style sheet to make it look better. And after that, I've placed a group box, this guy here, onto the form. And you can right click it and go to change title to edit the title. So I had done that already. Oops. And after that, I placed a horizontal layout into it. So that'll help us. So we got the group box with a horizontal layout and a button below it. So this here, that red line is the layout. So I've already done this, so we save some time, but let's preview it. So the first one, you see we have the group box and the button and tab 1. And the next step was to fill in the group box. So I put in a label to the left and then a line edit widget next to it. And then this is called tool button, this one here. So I just dragged them over there, and I recommend be patient. I'm not showing this now because things get messed up. So what I do is I save before I add something. Let's say this guy here. Before I try to add the widgets, I saved it under a different name. So 3.5 instead of 3.4. So you have a backup in case things go wrong, and they do go wrong easily. So don't place too many widgets all at once onto your form. So we have our group box and we can preview it and we can click on the button. It's a tool button, this guy here, and that's a regular push button. And then I added 2 radio buttons on top of the horizontal layout, and that's why I put the layout here. So I didn't want to have the radio buttons get mixed up with the rest. So this is kind of like separates the areas within the group box, and it turned out quite well actually. So when we preview it, we can see that we have now 2 radio buttons. And by default, none of them is checked, but once you click on one, then from then on, one will always be checked. So this is what I've done so far. And actually, one good news is when we have a label and when we change the text, let's say first it just says label. So when we change the text of the label, so I change it to browse to file. So if we make the text longer like this, you can see how the label, its widget itself automatically expands. So you don't have to try to make the perfect size because it will do it by itself. So because it's all in this horizontal layout design. And another thing is a widget highlighted, you can use the arrow keys to move them. But that's another tip. You can drag around with the mouse and things get screwed up easily. And now I'm using the arrow keys to move the whole horizontal design. And so the arrow keys give you more control, give you better control than the mouse. So the other things I've done so far is I changed the radio button default text to say something else. So we can highlight it, right click on it and say change text. So that lets you change the text. I also changed the label here because we'll be overriding this label. And I had given the group box a style sheet. So if we go to the group box and look at the style sheet, we can see the background is white. Otherwise it wouldn't have been white. So I gave it a style sheet for the entire group box itself. So let's convert it and import it into our Python modules. So after importing our converted UI file into our module, the first thing I did is when one of the radio buttons get clicked, update the text of the label. So the built-in method is setText. And when we run it now, after importing it, because of this edit functionality here, it says click a radio button. So when we click this guy, it says browse to UI file because we connected it here. And when we click this one, nothing happens because we haven't implemented that code yet. So that's the next module. So I just did the same thing, basically like updating the label. So it's the same label and we are just setting the text of the label. So when we do pi to exe, it sets it to browse to this and UI to pi. So this works nicely. So next what we want to do is we want to open a different file dialog depending upon which radio button has been clicked. So when we want to convert a UI file, a .ui to a pi file, we want to only select UI files. And then later when we work with the pi installer, we want to convert only .py files to executable files. So this might be the first approach. So we have our two different radio buttons and we connect them to different things, to different methods when they get clicked. So this is the clicked, connect, and then our methods that we are calling. And this on first sight, it looks good. So when we run it, when we click on the first button, it changes the label. We click on the tool button, brings up a dialog box. And from this line of code here, get open file name, no, queue file dialog, get open file name. And it fills in extensions with UI only, which is what we want. We only want to convert .ui files. And that's what we are specifying here, only .ui files. And when we click on Python files, Python to executable, pi to exe, the label gets updated. That works all very well, back and forth. And when we now open the next dialog, we want to see only pi files. But when we open it up, you might notice that it selected the UI one, didn't do the pi one. So then when we close it, it opens up a second instance of the dialog, and this time we have the .py file selected. And that seems to be a bug, so something isn't quite right with our code. So what we actually have to do is, before we change what our tool button does, we have to disconnect it. So before we're doing tool button, click connect in both of those methods. First, we have to disconnect it. And when we do disconnect without passing anything in, it disconnects everything from the tool button. So whatever the tool button has been connected to via this kind of code will get disconnected, and then after that we can connect it to two different methods. And the thing now is that the first time, if we didn't have clicked any of the two radio buttons, the button has not been connected to anything, so we might get an exception. So that's why I'm using a try except block here. So nothing has been clicked. Our tool button here should not be connected, but I'm wrapping it up. Okay, let's click one, bring up a file. See, .py file on the first time, and when we do cancel, it's working. So before, when we did UI to pi first and then switched to pi to exe, we were getting the UI extension, and when we close the dialog, it would pop up again, like it does now. Not quite fixed, but we do that in the next. But anyway, this is the bug, so this is what we are fixing by disconnecting. So the first workaround is we can programmatically click one of the two radio buttons. So after we say they should connect two different methods, we can just click on one of the two, and this will set the radio button to be selected. And that's the first thing we can do. So now this one defaults to being selected already. And when we open it up, we only see designer files as before. When we go to pi to exe, now we get the correct dialog box. And when we do cancel, it doesn't pop up again. And as you can see down here, this error message, disconnect failed between clicked and all its connections. Actually, we caused this by programmatically clicking, because that's what this try except block is meant to handle. So it might look a little bit ugly, but sometimes you just have to find a workaround, and this workaround works. And the next level of workaround is to make our tool connect to a method that does nothing. So that does a trick. So we are connecting the tool button to this function that just says pass, and this now avoids the exception. We have no more exception down here, and this works. So UI extension would be these. Convert doesn't do anything yet. We'll add that later. And Python extension is .py files. We can open those. So no more exception down here. So I know it looks a little ugly, those two workarounds, but it makes it work to overload the tool button. In this video, we overloaded widgets using disconnect. We added several new widgets to tab 2. We caught an exception when the disconnection of the tool button was not working, and we found a workaround to avoid this. and in the next video we will be debugging PyQt5 with Python hooks.